Welcome back from the break. I'm Madhav Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Our big focus this hour, data has shown that India remains the only G20 nation to be on track to meet the Paris Agreement. Yes, we've heard it from the world when it comes to the climate crisis, despite leading the push for climate and inviting the world to join our solar alliance. Be it the US, who won't stop the Alaska oil drilling, or China, whose actions led to it plunging into a power crisis. India must make sure that we're not lectured for climate. Yes, we have challenges that need to be met, and these developed countries have to take the onus on whether they diligently join the fight or continue one-upmanship in this matter. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, former diplomat, is live with us on the broadcast. We also have Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Manish Dabkara, MD and CEO, EnKingInternational, joins us live, as does Shubhra Mohanka, renewable energy expert, and director, Gotham Solar. Let me get you in here, Professor Nalapat, first. Professor Nalapat, now, there is obviously a shared responsibility between developing and developed nations for the climate, isn't there? But why have developed countries tried to shift the onus to developing ones?
Well, I'd like to point out, for one thing, there has been a tectonic shift in the politics of several countries. In Europe, for example, you have Poland, you have Hungary, you have countries like that. In the US, very definitely, there's a huge shift in politics. And now you have a large number of people who are basically saying, look, the future will look after itself. I mean, maybe, the spaceships will be invented that can take us to the moon or Mars. But in the meantime, let's do whatever we want. Roughly about 40% of the population I would think belong to that category. And they were represented, ably from their point of view by Donald Trump, who did not believe in anything to do with climate, and who actually believed climate change was a hoax, that all these climatic changes that are taking place, it was not because of any pollution or anything like that. So you have this problem in the politics there. Secondly, you have the problem of terrible inequality. And you have a situation where the very rich are becoming extremely rich, and the very poor are not only increasing, but they are sliding into even deeper poverty. And that being the case, the reality is that funds are very tight, and they just don't want to spend on good causes. So you can have somebody like John Kerry, who speaks a lot, talks a lot, but does not act very much. And you have a lot of talk to basically camouflage the fact that very little is being done on the basic issue of ensuring that the developing countries get access to technology, for one thing, get access to funds, for one thing. And instead you spend many times that amount on fighting the effect of climate change in your own countries. So this is a problem that is being faced. As far as India is concerned, it's now a leader in the climate fight. And now, as a consequence of that, you may have some people who believe that India is ready to make concessions that are absolutely, impossible from the point of view of people. Well, the fact is, India was not forced into taking this stand. India took the stand willingly. And even when India was much weaker, as Ambassador Vohra will tell you, India resisted pressure, very strongly resisted pressure. In my view, resisted a little too much in some places, so that there was no take. But today, the Prime Minister has made it very, very clear that India will be part of the solution, in his words. So from that point of view, there is a very welcome change in India. But the reality is, we are still a country with hundreds of millions of people who are extremely poor. And it's a very important priority to raise them. So on the one hand, you've got all these schemes. And I would like to say that I fully agree that, for example, solar panels, should be used. I tried doing that in my Gurugram house. And for some, I don't know, maybe the panels were from a neighboring country. They stopped working. And then I tried to get them repaired. I tried to get them fixed. It was almost impossible. It was a huge problem, with the result that they became essentially architectural decorations to the house. So, I hope my experience is not the usual one, It's certainly not the usual one these days. And now, after hearing some of our young discussants, I feel emboldened to try again. But this is the reality and the practical reality. And I fully agree. The private sector should be involved. And as for, the distribution companies, they've enjoyed monopolies. And despite monopolies, they are making losses. There's something going on there. And I do believe that, it's important to make them fall in line where climate goals are concerned. If necessary, you can write off some of their debts or some of their outstandings. You can also check and see if some businesses are not paying them properly. But I would like to say that the train of progress cannot be held back by a single coach or a single passenger.
Indeed. And what makes it worse is, Professor Nalapat, the flip-flop that has happened, by the US on the Paris Accord, on COP, isn't it, sir?
Well, flip-flop, it's a complete reversal. And frankly, the President of the United States has very limited power to change anything. Gas prices are going through the roof. Why? Because Americans are still, gas guzzlers. And for them, now, if you tell them, go to public transport, you go to San Diego, you go to Los Angeles, you go to so many of these cities in the US, I've been there, there is no such thing as public transport. I was talking today to a friend in San Diego, and I was telling him, why don't you go by public transport? He said, it's 4.5 miles that I will need to walk to reach the nearest bus stand. 4.5 miles, through a city is not a pleasant walk. So I would say that apart from fixing infrastructure, you have to fix these issues as well. And I do believe that they also need to be brought to public attention. India is going the extra 10 miles, and other countries are talking 100 miles and going back.
Okay, let me quickly get in Ambassador Deepak Vohra at this point as well. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, is it time now for the developed world to stop lecturing, particularly countries like India, vis-a-vis issues of climate change, looking at how much we've actually done versus them in the last, say 5 to 10 years, if we take as a benchmark?
You're absolutely right. Thank you once again for keeping me on your show, and I will listen with great interest to Ms. Mohanka and to Mr. Dabkara. Of course, I've heard what Professor Nalapat had to say, always a learning experience. Sir, there's nothing new about this kind of hypocrisy where everybody else is blamed except themselves. In my 48 years in diplomacy and counting, I've seen this. I remind you, sir, that Professor Nalapat, you might recall, 2007, 2008, there was a global agricultural crisis. There was a shortage of food. In your neighboring country, Pakistan, the military had to guide the warehouses. In many countries in Africa, there was rioting, etc., etc. And what did the Americans say? Well, there's a global shortage of food because the Indians are eating more. So we should starve so that the Americans can waste food. Now, that is the kind of hypocrisy that we're seeing. But now in 2021, perhaps for the first time, we are seeing devastating extreme weather hitting rich countries. Floods, droughts, wildfires. We're seeing it in the United States, we saw in Germany, seeing it in Australia. That my money does not buy me an insurance against climate change, buddy. So I've got to do something more. That, I believe, is the lesson which my mother, your mother, our mother, Earth, is giving to those nations that were shamelessly exploiting her resources and not putting anything back. I believe that is the biggest change. And in Glasgow, in COP20, this will be at the back of everybody's mind. Whatever your nuclear power, whatever your atomic weapons, your hypersonic or multisonic missiles or whatever you have, it doesn't protect you against the effects of climate change. That is the big lesson today. And I believe that we will see a change in attitude. I believe how fast they move, sir, it's very difficult to say. When they go back home, their domestic pressures will rise and say, well, we're not going to give up these big gas guzzlers. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But I believe in the 4.5 billion year history of our planet, this is a climacteric. This is a moment when we will shape the future. I believe most leaders, sir, are now beginning to understand this. You forget about Donald Trump. He was he was a geopolitical arsonist, so leave him out. But all the other people, I believe. Boris Johnson used to be in denial of climate change. He suddenly changed his mind and says, no, it's a terrible thing. We have to work together to prevent it. So the change we see coming, sir, that is a hopeful sign.
Okay. And is there also time, perhaps, Shubhra, for the developed world to learn from the developing world, as well? There are possibly certain lessons that, US, UK, EU can pick up from India, aren't they?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm still shocked, actually. I mean, I'm not that great in economics that we are still developing world. I mean, I never thought that we were developing, because at least in the renewable energy sector, we are light years ahead of US, UK. I would say, they're hugely important. We are getting beaten from China only because of the duty factor and their dumping issues and everything. Otherwise, I would say that the kind of standards that our country has developed, the kind of technology that our country has in solar pumping, it's the best in the world. We are the only country in the world which has deployed 1 lakh solar pumps. And that was just last year's target. This year's target is 10 lakh solar pumps. Next year target is 50 lakh solar pumps for farmers. I don't know of a single country who has gone beyond thousands, I would say, or beyond hundreds, I would say. Today we are the largest market, and the best thing is that it's all indigenous. We are manufacturing the entire component in-house, be it solar panels, be it pumps, motors. I was so sorry to hear what Mr. Nalapat had to say. Such a distinguished figure, and it's such a big disservice as a solar industry. But China is dumping their entire stuff, and what you get the cheapest you install at that, and if that awareness is not there at the public level to understand, distinguish between one technology with the other, and there is no servicing that you can actually get from China. End of the day, on any kind of electronics, anything you need servicing. And if you're not able to get that, then what are we doing? So I think we in Western world is a huge, they have got miles to learn from us in terms of both technology as well as the kind of program that we are running, which is both decentralized and utility scale. As I said, it's a unique thing in itself, which no other country is doing. Be it in utility, we have gone in floating solar. We are installing solar panels over dams, over canals. Andaman Nicobar, which is completely run on DG sets, is going to be run on a solar cum storage kind of a solution, which will be one of its kind when it gets developed. It's already in Leh, we are doing the highest solar utility scale plant, which is going to be one in the world. If you look at solar pumping program, as I said, it's one of the kinds in the world. If you look at the solar mini grid program that we're now proposing, and through ISA, we are proposing something called a One Sun, One World grid kind of a thing, where half the time it's going to run, the solar power plant is going to run in India, and when sun comes up in UK, then it's going to run there. That kind of an interconnectivity, the kind of technological solutions that we are bringing to the table, I would say we are miles ahead of. I'm not sounding arrogant, but we need to learn from whatever best. German is was very good in technology. We need to learn from them, but standalone basis, we are really, really ahead today. If I look at a world level, there's no question about it.
Okay. Let me take that to Manish as well. Manish, as far as the lessons are concerned, what do you believe the main takeaways, the main learnings are from how India has handled the issue of climate change? What are the Indian lessons for the world that perhaps can be highlighted at COP26, but perhaps can be highlighted through listening to your point as well, if international audiences today are viewing NewsX? Manish Dabkara? Is he there with us?
Okay, may I answer that while we're waiting for him?
I think we've lost Manish. Yes, Ambassador Vohra, please go ahead.
Yes,
the one takeaway for the rest of the world: join India in its fight against climate change. Period.
Yes, Manish, are you there with us? You can go ahead now.
Yes. It was rightly said. We are the first generation who is facing the highest impact of climate change, and probably we should be the last generation to do something about it, because the next generation would be in danger while facing the various natural calamities and various other issues which are generating because of the global warming. So the world should know, like in reference to the per capita emission, India is having that means the per capita emission level. We are having already a sustainable lifestyle. So developed nations and other nations should learn from the India, whatever the government had taken the various decision in reference to a national solar mission on a national climate action plan on climate change. So whatever the activities through different 8 pillars Indian government had demonstrated already should be a very good learning lesson for various other nations.
Yes, no doubt. I want to go back to Ambassador Vohra to just elaborate on that point you were making. How can the world join India's fight? Please go ahead, elaborate on that.
I just wanted to say, sir, that what are we looking for? As Ms. Mohanka said very clearly, we have the technology, maybe not the best of the best, but we certainly are right up there with countries like Germany that have cutting edge technology. What we require at this time, because we have many, many competing priorities in India, and agriculture is one of them, feeding our people, improving lifestyles, getting electricity everywhere, ghar mein jal, nal mein jal, whatever. All those are our priorities. So we need funding for this. And if these people can give the funding to us, our track record is superb. We never waste money. We are known globally for our jugaad, for our frugal innovation. We can do that again in fighting climate change and lead the world. Sir, we are our planet's best hope. Mother India, she's the mother to all our children, to her 7.7 billion children. She will take care of them. Just repose faith in us.
Yes. Professor Nalapat, come in here on what perhaps should be our message. There will be, of course, an opportunity for the Prime Minister to address the gathered nations, heads of state in Glasgow. What should be our message, not just to Glasgow, but the entire world, sir?
Well, our message should be that this is a problem that will finally come back and hit you. Just as, what came out of Wuhan. Some countries said, oh, don't worry, we have no problem. But then they all started having major problems, whether rich or poor, whatever the ethnicity. This virus does not really respect any of that. So the same thing with climate change. The reality is that unless, every country does whatever it can and a little bit more, in some cases, it will be technology, as in the case of Germany, for example, if it works with other countries and jointly develops, solar systems, rather than try and ensure that it's proprietary technology and that only German companies are involved. Well, that's, whether it's that, whether it is funding. For example, the GCC countries have substantial degree of funds. And I think it's important for them to get involved in the climate battle. And frankly, they can also be benefited by different forms of energy coming there, by the knowledge industries being set up there as, in a sense, compensation for that money. So every country has something to bring to the table. And we need a lot more than talk. India has, as they say, not only walk the talk, but run the talk. And it began, very frankly, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, these things are happening. The one thing about the Prime Minister, believe it or not, I think in terms of basically talking about all the various things he's done, I think there's still a lack of understanding as to the changes that are taking place in our country. They'll become evident in about 15 years' time, but they're not evident now. But this is happening across the country. India is very much part of the solution. India, in fact, as the young lady was very correctly saying, and very proudly saying, leading in the search for solutions. And I do believe the Indian example ought to be looked at, studied, and if I may say so, followed by different countries who are, John Kerry, for example, will probably have never heard of some of the things that our discussants have been talking about. He's so fixated on just, doing something which will essentially make sense only to a certain constituency in the United States. He's a politician first and foremost. But for climate warriors, you have to be much more than a politician. You have to be much more than a businessman. You have to be much more than an academic. You have to be a global citizen.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that should be the last word. So let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.